Hi, I'm Grace Lynch. Welcome to my channel. This video, I'm going to share my approach to what I'm calling trauma-informed 12-step care, 12-step recovery. Um, so as I mentioned in different places, other videos, some challenges I had to working through uh, brain rehab and surviving it and building life afterwards had been that uh, had to do in part with the fact that I'd experienced aphasia so many years before, never gotten any help for it, experienced it as an autistic synesthetic person, um, and then been building language as best I could in the way that I had before, but also including that experience of having had to live in awareness and remember, have my body remember living in awareness of my perceptual world without the ability to apply words to it. And even after words came back, from then on for the rest of my life, there remained, I guess, once the brain learns how to do something, it doesn't forget. So, in processing my perceptions, I would still be able to apply language, but there would be a longer gap of processing the perceptions without language, and then without my realizing it, that would play a role in the meaning that I was building. Another problem I had was in terms of trauma work when I was formally diagnosed with PTSD and I tried to get into therapy. I quickly found that the usual cognitive approaches to trauma work that the different providers were offering to me, this kind of cognitive foundation, didn't work because my cognition didn't work in the same way as that theirs did. And I couldn't have a sort of a narrative context for any of my experience, so I couldn't use that tool to relativize my trauma. Um, I found that I could sort of put a story around it, but it didn't get to the heart of the experience, so then I could never have peace with it. And with regards to 12-step recovery, I had been physically sober and clean for a long time, but in the act of finding the diagnoses, when I started applying them to my experience, which I had to bring myself back in my language world and learn how to be part of the society around me now that I finally could, because with the help of the clonidine and some practice, I could integrate language with my personal experience in a way that worked with other people. What I found when I got the terms from the providers of my neurological conditions, I found when I tried to find my words at meetings, nobody could relate to them. When I worked with a sponsor, the sponsor couldn't relate either. And I quickly found that the response to me finding a language from my authentic experience in recovery, dealing with all these, which I had to, sober, was that I had outside issues for which there was no outside help. The judgment of the professionals available were that they'd never met somebody with the intersection of all of these conditions together. There was no science for it, and so there could be no comprehensive treatment plan made for it. Um, the the strategy of choice that I found was what I judged to be a neurotypical approach, was the supposition that I could treat my trauma part, or I could work with my autism part, or I could work with the aphasia part, or I could work with the recovery part, or I could work with, I think I said trauma. Um, but it's supposed that I could just operate as if one dimension of me was that and work on that while I'm working with a professional who specializes that, and then take that home and integrate it. And the problem is my mind doesn't work like that. I am all of me, all the dimensions, all the time. I don't understand how to take part of the functioning and separate it out and work on that and then bring it back inside my heart and work with it. So it's really frustrating because other people seem to take for granted that anybody can do that. And I take for granted that nobody can do that because it's not real to me. So it's a very strange thing. It's like living on the other side of something. And so um, I kind of stumbled along trying to find my way back, how to be the person who needed to live in the world the way I found the world, which did things by compartmentalization and plug and play like that, which didn't make any sense to me. And having an experience that what an aspect of the raw experience was languagelessness, which continued to make sense, not only because from birth I had lived in whatever the world is a coherent kind of music, which I don't know how else to say it. There's always been inside that. Everything is somehow that. But then I got to experience as an adult having my contextual mind stripped of language and then living inside. It was a horrific experience, yeah, but it was still experience. And living inside, having the perception, only being able to put it together in terms of that coherence and surviving that so that words came back, but the base experience, the only part that stayed continuous was whatever that other perceptual mode is. So, um, like by a series of coincidences, I stumbled on a strategy that I've been using ever since. In a very real sense, I found my instinct is to use the structure of 12-step recovery to deal with the thing I was struggling with. And over time, what I found is that I have to have I had to tighten I had to develop my own perception of what my addiction was, what it meant functionally. I had to develop my own understanding of what my trauma was. I had to develop my own understanding of what meaning is. And so what I settled on was that addiction for me was the condition of when I genuinely want to not use, my mind goes back to it anyway. That makes it so that it's something that operates, yeah, it distorts things when I'm inside an understanding thing, but it also governs my life when I'm not an understanding based thing. It makes it a biological thing. And that's a problem that I can't fix with my thinking or my understanding mind or my belief mind or my behavior one. Trauma, if I'm not going to have it as a context thing, trauma I came to understand as an undigested memory. And so then I began exploring a way to use the 12 steps to properly digest the memory, and I've talked about that in other videos. And meaning, I've had to sort that out as well, because meaning, the way that I build it, I have to build it from what gels with my human experience, regardless of whether it lands in the outside world. Because first and foremost, my language mind has to govern my experience. I have to be able to get through my day and not be triggered into the horror of the unprocessed aphasia. I have to be able to go through, manage my finances, the laundry, cook food, navigate my car and different things like that. All whether or not I interact with other people. My language mind has to work 24/7. I only have to be social occasionally. And so the idea that I hit on, and the process that I've been practicing has been the astonishing discovery that I can use the unchangeable fact of my addiction. If I accept that, the act of accepting a condition, a full awareness of something that feels like a problem that I can't do anything about with anything in me, my behavior, my cognition, my belief, or my understanding, then facing that and not running away from it, and learning how to breathe through that experience and let that awareness work in my body and not freak out about it, then I find that there were certain understandings of myself and the world, certain thoughts I had, and behaviors that were not, they didn't work to include that aspect of my experience. And very slowly I came around to the notion that since the unsolvable problem was part of my experience, if my understanding of myself, the world, meaning whatever, did not work, it was the understanding that had to change because the experience had already happened. And if I was willing to do that, then I began practicing self-reflection and actively working with the steps, having the awareness and then letting it, and then using the direct experience and the process of the steps to re-understand the parts of myself, the ways of myself that don't actually work in light of the experience. And I began practicing how to be with the experience and then adjust, like to develop authenticity and then adjust my integrity to be in line with what my experience has to be, even if it meant that I had to reimagine my life, my relationships, purpose, meaning, and everything else. So that's part one, because I know that was a lot.